Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much again for joining us for this Wednesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. Up first here on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got some warning areas out, winter storm warnings here in the red shaded areas, northern Kuskokwim Valley, back to the west, and also up to the north there across Galena. And there's also a high wind warning out for the central eastern Alaska range through the passes, looking for gusts to come up to 70 miles per hour. And all these warnings continue out throughout the day tomorrow. Yellow shaded areas here, winter weather advisories, all the way back to the Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta, St. Lawrence Island. And that's for conditions that aren't as treacherous as the warning areas. Next graphic. A little farther to the south there, which shows up the high wind watch out that's out for Turnagain Arm, higher elevations, the East Anchorage and the Chugach Mountains. Got a wave coming northward, and that watch is out for tomorrow, Thursday, for possible gusts to 80 miles per hour. Satellite imagery showing the front here, roughly the back edge right through here, just getting past Kodiak. They picked up about half an inch of rain with that system in the 12-hour period ending this afternoon. Lots of moisture streaming northward. Nice day over the southern southeast coast with lots of clouds up into the eastern interior, spreading northward there, and just solid clouds across the Brooks Range and the North Slope back into St. Lawrence Island. Some breaks here occurring behind the front from Shelikof Strait into eastern Bristol Bay and the Aleutian Range, and a few lesser breaks up there around the Bethel area, and another system spreading moisture northward there. You can see some cirrus reaching the southwest coast with main rain-producing clouds occurring back here toward the main low center, and then northerly flow out to the west here from north to south. Really not much in the way of cold air has gotten down to the Aleutians, mostly in the mid-40s though. Winds just swung around, gusting up to about 40 miles an hour, 40 to 45 there, Adak, Atka, on out toward Shemya, where temperatures have fallen into the upper 30s this afternoon, but still in the mid-40s there for the central Aleutian areas, in a break there for the Pribilof Islands. And rolling that again, some shower activity just to the southeast there of St. George, and just skirting the St. Paul area with clearing just to your west. Otherwise, clouds, mostly didn't see any precipitation reported at Savunga during the afternoon hours there, but was snow, Nome, and across much of the Seward Peninsula in across the northern interior areas. And you can see clouds after a dry start or a mostly clear start over the northern panhandle, mid and high level clouds now sweeping into the northern areas. On the chart, that front roughly along or just east of the Alaska Range this afternoon, winds gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour out in advance of that, again, highest over the highest elevations, and the heaviest rainfall again up to a half an inch, or inch and a half of rain falling on the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula. Lighter amounts off to the east, but that's all spreading northeast and will increase later. Otherwise, again, breaking out behind the front, some scattered, mostly in the form of rain now, up across Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta areas with Sparivon, mixed rain and snow. McGrath still had snow. Bethel, rain, and St. Mary's, rain. So it's a real sharp edge there between the rain and snow, but definitely snow Seward Peninsula to St. Lawrence Island and central interior northward there, spreading up toward the Brooks Range. Back out to the west, fairly tight gradient, but not that strong. Could see gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour out in this area, lighter toward the Shemya 2 area. Main low now advancing eastward to about Nikolsky, and some gusty southeast winds in advance of that with lighter rainfall amounts but more still pretty steady. And for tonight, that low center continues to weaken, edges over toward the Alaska Peninsula about 4 a.m. in the morning. That's when it's going to start to take a turn to the north here, kind of follow the trough axis up to the north. This front, again, pretty much stalled out here across the Bristol, or across the western Prince William Sound area, east of Kodiak Island, a wave forming right here. And as that tracks northward, that should kick those winds up into the, again, the 80-mile-per-hour range there for the Anchorage area, turning an arm tomorrow, depending on exactly where the low center tracks, but definitely warmer air spreading northward almost into the Yukon Valley. And still snow, though, for the Brooks Range westward across Noatak, Kotzebue Sound, Seward Peninsula, north side now, becoming mixed there around Nome, and mixed back towards St. Lawrence Island. Rain showers, gusty northwest winds with those showers tapering off, especially out toward Adak and Atka. General area of rain here in the west. And then for Thursday, tomorrow, that low lifts northward there to just west of Kuskokwim Bay in the afternoon. And the front pushing eastward there, and of course strongest winds will occur in advance of the front, so that'll be probably early tomorrow morning into maybe early afternoon here for the south central Alaska area. And then as you can see, less gradient, winds will lighten up late in the afternoon, late in the day. Areas of snow showers up here to the north, especially north of the occluded front. Back to the west, kind of a mixed precipitation pattern going on Norton Sound to St. Lawrence Island, but snow back up across the northwest coast. Some showers on the eastern Arctic coast, gusty winds on the increase here. Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, even Point Lay getting a little gusty. Rain here with this trough swinging through the Alaska Peninsula. Rain becoming heavier over the northern panhandle throughout the afternoon. Outlook for Friday, that front edge is eastward, so a wet day coming up for the southeast coast. Drier over south central Alaska, especially the North Gulf Coast, with scattered rain and snow showers, a little enhanced here along and just west of the Alaska Range. Kuskokwim Valley to the northwest, snow for the Arctic coast, light snow showers for the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island, with the next system not as strong, just 993 millibars here. They'll be spreading rain and some southwest breezes into the Pribilof Islands, trailing back into Nikolsky, eventually shifting into Unalaska in the afternoon. Showers in store for Falls Pass, maybe Cold Bay. Otherwise, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula looking dry. Could see some sun there for Kodiak Island with generally west-southwest winds there, especially on the east side of the island, and more showers back over the western Aleutians. That low staying to the south initially. Low temperatures for tomorrow morning, Thursday morning here. Single numbers for the Arctic coast up the east side. Same thing for the Brooks Range. South of the mountain zone, much milder, mid-30s here to upper 30s around Bristol Bay. Upper 30s for the Aleutians. And all 30s here to near 40 south of the Alaska Range. Even the Copper River Basin, all in the mid-30s, near 40 for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 40s and lower 50s for the southeast coast, and 45 to 50 here for south central Alaska. Cool or warmest along the North Gulf Coast, about 50 for Kodiak. Upper 40s Alaska Peninsula, cooling into the 30s in the interior. 20s Brooks Range, and teens for the North Slope, otherwise mid-20s for the Arctic coast. Highs for tomorrow, lows for tomorrow for Friday morning in the teens here for the Brooks Range. Upper Yukon Valley, 20s for the Arctic coast. Upper 30s here for Bristol Bay, mid-30s, cooling into the lower 30s there for the Seward Peninsula, south side to the St. Lawrence Island, and lower to mid-40s here for the southeast coast. For the high temperatures Friday afternoon, mid to upper 20s along the Arctic coast there, with lower to mid-20s, cooling a little bit with a higher elevation in the Brooks Range, and then back into the lower 30s south of the mountains to mid to upper 30s there for the Tanana Valley. Lower 40s Kuskokwim Delta, to mid-40s for the Bristol Bay and the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, upper 40s to lower 50s again for the southeast coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather, Thursday morning, we've got quite an area IFR here from the Yukon Delta up across the Seward Peninsula, the Kobuk Valley, across the northern Koyukuk Valley, south side of the Brooks Range, spilling into the western North Slope there on the west side, and otherwise marginal VFR, IFR, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, right up along the coastline and eastward across the northern panhandle with marginal VFR everywhere else except the lee side of the Alaska Range here, Tanana Valley, 40 Mile Country VFR. And that slips northward a little bit there, a little more moisture spilling in just past the Alaska Range. IFR still back to the west and northwest. Massive area of IFR now, Gulf of Alaska, up in across all of Prince William Sound, in across the northern, almost the northern half of the Panhandle. Got some VFR though down to the south and Dixon Entrance, and a band out there to the west, which Friday morning dissipates into marginal VFR, with VFR breaking out over the far western Aleutians and around the Pribilofs. IFR here in the west and along the south side of the Brooks Range, as well as the central and western North Slope. IFR across the Kuskokwim Valley, Susitna Valley, Madanuska Valley, right up to the Alaska Range. Most of the Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, and the northern Panhandle, IFR, marginal VFR to the south, marginal Kodiak Island. And then for Friday afternoon, lots of IFR up here across the Brooks Range into the Koyukuk and Kobuk Valleys, all the way out to about Kotzebue, St. Lawrence Island, Nome, White Mountain, Elam, those areas IFR, southeast interior, Wrangell Mountains IFR, and a good swath of the Panhandle in that IFR zone. Looking at passes, excuse me, Anaktuvuk, marginal VFR at times tomorrow, same forecast for Adigan, looking pretty marginal. Lake Clark and Merrill also expect marginal VFR for both passes. Rainy, same forecast. Windy though, southerly flow, could see some IFR on the southern approach, otherwise marginal, to possible VFR on the north side. And then Isabel, marginal VFR. Mentasta looking VFR to start and then becoming marginal. And for Tanita, marginal VFR. Portage, IFR. And Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR becoming IFR toward midday. And the freezing levels here, 2,000 feet back down south of the Aleutians, but the surface way up here to the north, Bering Strait, cutting through the interior areas, 2,000 feet right up almost to the southern Koyukuk Valley there, and then quite a thermal gradient here across the southeast coast, 12,000 over the Queen Charlottes, falling back to about 2,000 there around Juneau. Icing could be some considerable moderate rime icing here, above 12,000 feet to the south, a lot warmer air coming in, and then about 8,000 feet there. Also here, western Susitna Valley to the Alaska Range, could be some widespread rime icing of about 4,000 feet, and then lighter rime icing, quite an area though, anywhere from the Alaska Peninsula right up the west coast into the northwest valleys, and that 3,000 to 4,000 feet and up. Jet stream, strong southwest jet here, going up and over the top of this huge ridge over the eastern and North Pacific. 150 to 140 knots, trough way down to the south, so that's grabbing a lot of moisture, pulling it northward. Southwest, 50 knots there over the northwest interior. With that sharp upper level trough, 9,000 foot winds, low pressure coming northward here to right off the southwest coast. Strong flow, 50 to 60 knots here right into south central Alaska, back into the Gulf. 40 to 50 knot winds over the northern panhandle, diminishing down to the south. Much lighter up here to the north. 9,000 foot winds, or I'm sorry, 3,000 foot winds, showing still good flow here. Not quite as strong, down to about 25 to 35 knots here, but still pretty brisk along the panhandle. Quite a gradient up against this ridging poking up there toward the Queen Charlotte. So Central Coast 45 knots, 25 knots there across Lincoln and Glacier Bay, and 35 knot winds for Kodiak Island. Northwest 20 to 25 here across the Aleutians, and westerlies at about 35 farther west. Turbulence-wise, southeast winds here. Could be some areas of severe turbulence along and in the lee side of the Unalaska Island as well as the western Alaska Peninsula. Moderate chop below 7,000 feet southeast interior, all along the mountains here of the remainder of the interior. A little more widespread up in the northwest areas. Pretty smooth though, hopefully, for the southern southeast coast.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me today is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. And Cindy, we hear a lot about tsunamis in the news, probably a lot more than we used to, but let's remind everybody, what is a tsunami?
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Sure.
Tsunami is basically, it's really simple. It's just a disturbance in the water column. So the entire water column from the seafloor to the sea surface is disturbed by something major, usually a major earthquake. But it can also be a volcanic eruption, even an asteroid. Landslide is especially dangerous.
Okay, so if I'm sitting in my bathtub and I drop a bath toy, that could be a bathtub tsunami.
It is absolutely a bathtub tsunami.
Okay, very good. So Alaska is one of the states, or maybe the state, with the greatest amount of coastline, so tsunamis are a pretty major risk here in Alaska. Who is most at risk?
Yeah, Alaska is significant. We actually make most of the Pacific's tsunamis.
Wow, okay.
On the Aleutian Trench. And it's where the Pacific plate is subducting underneath the American plate. And we produce some very large, great quakes. And of course, the most at risk is the Aleutian Trench.
Okay.
But that extends into south central Alaska as well. They're at huge risk. And then southeast Alaska's risk is really mostly landslide focused.
Okay. Are there any places along the Alaskan coastline that don't have a tsunami risk, or at least a very, very low risk?
Absolutely. The Bering Sea's risk is very low, and the Arctic's risk is very low as well.
Okay, so when we're talking about tsunami dangers, those are places that need to be monitored, but probably not really.
No,
Not
I
a
mean,
big
I
deal.
won't say never.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know
You can't.
better.
Science knows better.
Right. So,
Very good.
near to never.
Okay. Well, let's just say you're on the coast, anywhere in Alaska. What are warning signs that tsunami dangers are threatening you right now?
This is super important because Alaska's greatest risk, especially out on the Aleutians and South Central, is a near-field tsunami, and then of course landslides in southeast. It's even more intense because we
So
can't.
shorter warning time.
No warning time.
Okay.
The earthquake is the warning.
Okay.
And that is the most important thing for anybody to remember. The water can arrive in less than 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, at the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, we need to get the warning out in 5 minutes. So for those near-field tsunamis, it's the earthquake is the warning. So if you feel shaking,
Okay.
and of course the first thing you do is drop, cover, and hold,
Right.
and you need to start counting
Okay.
slowly to 20.
The right way. How do you do that?
Oh, I teach kids to do it with their favorite things. So
Okay.
1 chocolate, 2 chocolate, 3 chocolate, but you
Chocolate's
can
good.
count anything you like.
Okay.
And if you're thinking of something happy, that helps.
Okay.
Especially helps kids, but it'll help your
So you
psyche.
don't speed up because you're getting stressed out. I see.
Right. It actually lowers your heart rate.
Interesting.
You know, so
Okay.
if you think of something you love and practice that. So you're in an earthquake, you're under the table, you're next to the ocean,
Okay.
right?
Right.
This is important if you're next to the ocean.
Okay.
If you're not next to the ocean, don't worry about it. Just stay in place under cover.
And you're talking about a mile, a quarter mile? What's close?
A mile, even a couple miles.
Okay.
You know, our rule of thumb used to be a mile inland was safe, but the last few tsunamis have taught us otherwise.
Okay.
So, yeah, you know, in Japan we had an inundation up to 10 miles.
Right.
So,
Okay. And that was a big quake.
That was a big
So you
quake.
have a quake, you're counting slowly to 20.
to 20.
What's next?
And if you get to 20 and it's still shaking, you need to evacuate.
Okay.
And that is, that's scary.
Yeah.
Because you're
That's a big quake.
evacuating in a live event that's still shaking. You know, 1964 shook for 4.5 minutes. Indonesia shook for 12 minutes.
Wow. Right.
Japan, I think, shook for 6. I'm not sure of that, but it was long. Anyway, more
Right.
than 20 seconds.
And that's a sign of a very major earthquake, the worst.
Well, 20 seconds is a magnitude 7, so that's
Okay.
not the worst. But what a magnitude 7 can do is trigger a landslide.
Okay.
And those landslides might be a submarine landslide, so you won't see it, you won't hear it, you won't know it, and then the water's moving.
Okay.
So that's really, really, really dangerous. That's what happened in 64 first. Seward, Valdez, Whittier all had landslides first.
Okay. And when you're talking about the water is a warning sign too. What happens with the water that gives you a very easy visual sign that something's changing?
Not guaranteed. It might go out, it might go way out really fast enough to leave the fish behind, but that's not guaranteed. It might just be a fast flood instead.
Okay.
So either way, if it's acting like a super fast rising tide, faster than a tide should rise,
Right.
get out of there.
Okay.
And if it goes out really fast, get out of there.
Yeah.
You know, we lost a lot of lives because people will go check out the new tide pools or
Sure.
pick up fish or shells or, you know, so, and it should feel weird.
Right.
You know, it should be weird.
So pay attention to those natural warning signs and how you feel, because those are maybe the only clues you have.
Right, and sound also. You can hear a tsunami. It'll sound like a roaring train maybe.
Okay.
Or it might sound silent because the water's been pulled out.
Right.
And that's pretty weird. Imagine camping
Yeah.
at night
Yeah.
near the beach and all of a sudden you don't hear the ocean anymore.
That would be different.
That would be weird.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you also might hear blowing bubbles, and that's actually from the pressure that's blowing the air out from the sand grains, rock grains.
Interesting.
So if you hear blowing bubbles, that's a little weird.
Okay.
Or clinking rocks, like a rain stick. So those are the sound signs. So the visual is rushing in or rushing out, and roaring especially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of work to get people and keep people aware of what the tsunami warning signs are and what their risks are around Alaska. And there's a website that can help them do that. Where can they go online to get more information for their school, their home, their church, their business?
Oh, there's several. The National Tsunami Warning Center has a website as well, and the easiest way to look that up is just NTWC.
NTWC.
The
Okay.
URL is not intuitive at all.
Okay.
There's also ready.alaska.gov. The state of Alaska has a lot of helpful stuff. Preparedness kits. They have everything you need to get ready.
Okay.
And then for teachers and others, there's a wonderful curriculum called Alaska Tsunami Education Program.
Alaska Tsunami Education Program. Okay.
And that's AKwx.
AKwx. Okay, very good. Those are really good tips to get more information and search that out and help your own community stay safe with the threat of tsunamis around Alaska. Next time we come back and talk to you some more about the Tsunami Ready program and get more in depth on how people can learn more about the risks and what to do here in Alaska. So thank you for joining us today, Cindy. And next time on Alaska Weather Facts, more on tsunamis around Alaska. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Looking at the sea ice analysis for Wednesday, continuing to grow here northward along the Arctic coast, and then the stuff to the north continuing to grow and expand southward, and lesser ice here on the western coast, and still really not much change Kotzebue Sound. And this may actually end up blowing out here over the next day or so along the Yukon Delta coast there. Marine forecasts, south winds 30 knots on the south coast. We've got gales central coast, become full gales up there with gusts of 60 knots out of the southeast on the north coast. 20-foot seas here, 13 feet south. Gale warnings, northerly canal, south 35 higher gusts, northwest 15 by contrast for Clarence Strait. And the outlook for Friday, small craft advisories here all along the coast now, westerly. 25 knots on the north coast, and then swinging around south, 30 knots, gust 45 just south of that zone, some kind of boundary right through there. Southeast 25 over the central and southern inside waters, northerly canal, south 25 knots, 5-foot seas. Gales in the forecast for Prince William Sound tomorrow with 7-foot seas, southeast 45 here for the North Gulf Coast, falling back to 30 knots, and then on down to 25 knots for the Barren Islands. Kachemak Bay, southeast 25 knots, just 6-foot seas there, 3 feet for the southern inlet, but up to 15 to 17 feet here for the Barren Islands and almost 20 feet for the North Gulf Coast. And the outlook for Friday, southwest 20, picking up a little bit there for northern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, the southern inlet down to Kachemak Bay, as well as the Barren Islands, all southwest now, 25 knots. 10 to 11-foot seas here for the Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast. More westerly on those winds there for the Middleton Island zone. Prince William Sound looking lighter with south at 15. Kodiak Island, south winds 20 knots, 14-foot seas here on the Pacific side. Southwest 25 to 35 knots. From the south-southwest there from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev. North side, west 25, southeast 25 for Bristol Bay. And for Friday, west 25 knots, Shelikof Strait, lighter winds on the Pacific side there. Seas still 11 feet, so small craft advisories. Small crafts, Sitkinak all the way to Cape Sarachev, southwest 30 on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, and 25 knot winds with nearly 10-foot seas for Bristol Bay. Eastern Aleutians, west-northwest, 30-35 knots with the gales mostly just west of Nikolsky, turning west at 35 for the Central Aleutians. Small craft advisories on back to the west. And then for Friday, still small craft advisories, a little less now, just 25 knots. Seas coming down 11 to 13 feet out here for the Adak and Atka zones. Southwest, 25 to 30, strongest on the Pacific side. Highest seas there as well, 13 feet. And mostly south winds for the Fox Islands with at 30 knots with seas as high as 14 feet. And for the southwest coast, we've got southeasterly, south of Nunivak Island, northeast 15, much lighter, and then picking back up to 30 knots for St. Lawrence Island. 30-knot winds from the north St. Matthew Island turn northwest as they sweep across the Pribilofs. And then they'll swing around to the south at 30 knots for St. Paul and St. George, southwest 30. Blowing into Kuskokwim Bay now, 9-foot seas, west 25, north of the island. Small craft advisories out of the north for St. Lawrence Island, and 8-foot seas around St. Matthew. For the central eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east winds 25 knots, 6-foot seas. 8-foot seas here on the western coast. Winds pick up from about Cape Lisburne, maybe even Point Lay on down to the Strait, northeast at 30 knots with 10 to 11-foot seas. Friday, east 15, a little lighter, but from Cape Thompson on up to the central coast, east winds 30 knots. No seas still 9 to 11 feet, and east 30 knots all the way to Demarcation Point and probably beyond, with seas running as high as 10 feet. And for tonight again, winter storm warnings out here for the snow over the interior and back in toward St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, warmer air coming northwards. There'll be more of a mixed precipitation, just mostly all rain here for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Windy in advance of this front, edging eastward, so rain heavy at times. Southern Kenai Peninsula over to about Cordova. Rain on the increase for the northern panhandle. That continues into Thursday. And high wind watch out for Anchorage, gust 80 miles per hour, mostly turning an arm in east Anchorage and the Chugach for Thursday. And we've got low pressure moving to the coast. And then Friday, more rain for the southeast coast.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.